Chapter 17 of Starman's Quest. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Starman's Quest by Robert Silverberg, Chapter 17. The old man's diary was a curious and fascinating document. Alan never tired of poring over it, trying to conjure up a mental image of the queer, plucky fanatic who had labored so desperately to bring the stars close to Earth. Like many embittered recluses, Cavour had been an enthusiastic diarist. Everything that took place in his daily life was carefully noted down: his digestion, the weather, any stray thoughts that came to him, tart observations on humanity in general. But Alan was chiefly interested in the notations that dealt with his researches on the problem of a faster than the speed of light space drive. Cavour had worked for years in London, harried by the reporters and mocked by scientists. But late in 2569 he had sensed he was on the threshold of success. In his diary for January 8, 2570, he wrote, "The Siberian site is almost perfect. It has cost me nearly what remains of my savings to build it, but out here I will have the solitude I need so much. I estimate 6 months more will see completion of my pilot model. It is a source of deep bitterness in me that I am forced to work on my ship like a common laborer, when my part should have ceased 3 years ago with the development of my theory and the designing of my ship. But this is the way the world wants it, and so shall it be." On May 8 of that year. Today there was a visitor, a journalist no doubt. I drove him away before he could disturb me, but I fear he and others will be back. Even in the bleak Siberian steppes I shall have no privacy. Work is moving along smoothly, though somewhat behind schedule. I will be lucky to complete my ship before the end of the year. On August 17. Planes continue to circle my laboratory here. I suspect I'm being spied on. The ship is nearing completion. It will be ready for standard Lexman drive flights any day now, but the installation of my space warp generator will take several months more. On September 20. Interference has become intolerable. For the 5th day an American journalist has attempted to interview me. My secret Siberian laboratory has apparently become a world tourist attraction. The final circuitry on the space warp generator is giving me extreme difficulties. There are so many things to perfect. I cannot work under these circumstances. I have virtually ceased all machine work this week. And on October 11, 2570. There is only one recourse for me. I will have to leave Earth to complete the installation of my generator. The prying fools and mockers will not leave me alone, and nowhere on Earth can I have the needed solitude. I shall go to Venus, uninhabited, uninhabitable. Perhaps they will leave me alone for the month or 2 I need to make my vessel suitable for interstellar drive. Then I can return to Earth, show them what I have done, offer to make the demonstration flight to Rigel and back in days. Perhaps. Why is it that Earth so tortures its few of original mind? Why has my life been one unending persecution, ever since I declared there was a way to shortcut through space? There are no answers. The answers lie deep within the dark recesses of the human collective soul, and no man may understand what takes place there. I am content to know that I shall have succeeded despite it all. Some day a future age may remember me, like Copernicus, like Galileo, as one who fought upstream successfully. The diary ended there, but in the final few pages were computations, a trial orbit to Venus, several columns of blast-off figures, statistics on the geographical distribution of the Venusian land masses. Cavour had certainly been a peculiar bird, Alan thought. Probably half the persecutions he complained of had existed solely inside his own fevered brain. But that hardly mattered. He had gone to Venus. The diary that had found its way back to the London Institute of Technology testified to that. And there was only one logical next step for Alan. Go to Venus. Follow the orbit Cavour had scribbled at the back of his diary. Perhaps he might find the Cavour ship itself. Perhaps the site of his laboratory, some notes, anything at all. He could not allow the trail to trickle out here. He told Jesperson, "I want to buy a small spaceship. I'm going to Venus." He looked at the lawyer expectantly and got ready to put up a stiff argument when Jesperson started to raise objections. But the big man only smiled. "Okay," he said. "When are you leaving?" "You aren't going to complain? The kind of ship I have in mind costs at least 200,000 credits." "I know that. But I've had a look at Cavour's diary, too. It was only a matter of time for you to decide to follow the old duck to Venus, and I'm too smart to think that there's any point of putting up a battle. Let me know when you've got your ship picked out, and I'll sit down and write the check." But it was not as simple as all that. Alan shopped for a ship. He wanted a new one, as long as he could afford it. And after several months of comparative shopping, and getting advice from the spaceport men, he picked the one he wanted. It was a sleek, glossy, 80-foot job, a Spacemaster 3878 model, equipped with Lexman converters and conventional ion jets for atmosphere flying. Smooth, streamlined, it was a lovely sight as it stood at the space field in the shadow of the great starships. Alan looked at it with pride, a slender, dark green needle yearning to pierce the void. He wandered around the spaceport and heard the fuelers and the oilers discussing it in reverent tones. "That's a mighty fine piece of ship, that green one out there. Some lucky fella's got it." Alan wanted to go over to them and tell them, "That's my ship. Me, Alan Donnell." But he knew they would only laugh. Tall boys not quite 19 did not own late model Starmasters with price tags of 225,000 credits. He itched to get off planet with it, but there were more delays. He needed a flight ticket first, and even though he had had the necessary grounding in astrogation technique and space piloting as an automatic part of his education aboard the Valhalla, he was rusty, and he needed a refresher course that took 6 weary months. After that came the physical exams and the mental checkups and everything else. Alan fumed at the delay, but he knew it was necessary. A spaceship, even a small private one, was a dangerous weapon in unskilled hands. An out-of-control spaceship that came crashing to Earth at high velocity could kill millions. The shock wave might flatten 50 square miles. So no one was allowed up in a spaceship of any kind without a flight ticket, and you had to work to win your ticket. It came through finally, in June of 3879, a month after Alan's 20th birthday. By that time he had computed and recomputed his orbit to Venus 100 different times. 3 years had gone by since he had last been aboard a spaceship, and that had been the Valhalla. His childhood and adolescence now seemed like a hazy dream to him, far in the back of his mind. The Valhalla, with his father and Steve and all the friends of his youth aboard, was 3 years out from Earth, with 7 years yet to go before it reached Procyon, its destination. Of course, the crew had experienced only about 4 weeks, thanks to the Fitzgerald contraction. To the Valhalla people, only a month had passed since Alan had left them, while he had gone through 3 years. He had grown up in those 3 years. He knew where he was heading now, and nothing frightened him. He understood people. And he had one great goal which was coming closer and closer with each passing month. Blastoff Day was the 5th of September, 3879. The orbit Alan finally settled on was a 6-day trip, at low acceleration, across the 40 million odd miles that separated Earth from Venus. At the spaceport he handed in his flight ticket for approval, placed a copy of his intended orbit on file with central routing registration, and got his field clearance. The ground crew had already been notified that Alan's ship was blasting off that day, and they were busy now putting her in final departure condition. There were some expressions of shock as Alan displayed his credentials to the ground chief, and climbed upward into the control chamber of the ship he had named the James Hudson Cavour, but no one dared question him. His eyes caressed the gleaming furnishings of the control panel. He checked with the central tower, and was told how long till his blast-off clearance, and rapidly surveyed the fuel meters, the steering jet response valves, the automatic pilot. He worked out a tape with his orbit on it. Now he inserted it into the receiving tray of the autopilot and tripped a lever. The tape slid into the computer, clicking softly and emitting a pleasant hum. 8 minutes to blast off, came the warning. Never had 8 minutes passed so slowly. Alan snapped on his view screen and looked down at the field. The ground crewmen were busily clearing an area as blast-off time approached. 1 minute to blast off, Pilot Donnell. Then the countdown began, second by second. At the 10 seconds to go announcement, Alan activated the autopilot and nudged the button that transformed his seat into a protective acceleration cradle. His seat dropped down, and Alan found himself stretched out, swinging gently back and forth in the protective hammock. The voice from the control tower droned out the remaining seconds. Tensely, Alan waited for the sharp blow of acceleration. Then the roaring came, and the ship jolted from side to side, struggling with gravity for a moment, and then sprang up, free from the earth. Some time later came the sudden thunderous silence as the jets cut out. There was the dizzying moment of free fall, followed by the sound of the lateral jets imparting longitudinal spin to the small ship. Artificial gravity took over. It had been a perfect take-off. Now there was nothing to do but wait for Venus to draw near. The days trickled past. Alan experienced alternating moods of gloom and exultation. In the gloomy moods he told himself this trip to Venus was a fool's errand, that it would just be another dead end, that Cavour had been a paranoid madman, and the hyperspace drive was an idiot's dream. But in the moments of joy he pictured the finding of Cavour's ship, the building of a fleet of hyperdrive vessels, the distant stars within an almost instantaneous reach. He would tour the galaxies as he had 2 years ago toured Earth. Canopus and Deneb, Rigel and Procyon, he would visit them all, from star to bright star, from one end of the universe to the other. The shining oval of Venus grew brighter and brighter. The cloud layer that enveloped Earth's sister planet swirled and twisted. Venus was virtually an unknown world. Earth colonies had been established on Mars and on Pluto, but Venus, with her harsh formaldehyde atmosphere, had been ignored. Uninhabited, uninhabitable, the planet was unsuitable for colonization. The ship swung down into the cloud layer. Floating wisps of gray vapor streamed past the orbiting Cavour. Finally Alan broke through, navigating now on manual, following as best he could Cavour's old computations. He guided the craft into a wide-ranging spiral orbit, 3,000 feet above the surface of Venus, and adjusted his view screens for fine pickup. He was orbiting over a vast, dust-blown plain. The sky was a fantastic color, mottled blues and greens and an all-pervading pink, and the air was a dull gray. No sun at all penetrated the heavy shroud of vapor that hung around the planet. For 5 hours he scouted the plain, hoping to find some sign of Cavour's habitation. It was hopeless, he told himself. In 1,300 years the bitter winds of Venus would have destroyed any hint of Cavour's site, assuming the old man had reached Venus successfully. But grimly Alan continued to circle the area. Maybe Cavour had been forced to land elsewhere, he thought. Maybe he never got here. There were a million maybes. He computed his orbit and locked the ship in. Eyes pressed to the view screen, he peered downward, hoping against hope. This trip to Venus had been a wild gamble from the start. He wondered if Max Hawkes would have covered a bet on the success of his trip. Max had been infallible when it came to hunches. Well, Alan thought, now I've got a hunch. Help me one more time, Max, wherever you are. Lend me some of your luck. I need it, Max. He circled once more. The Venusian day would last for 3 weeks more, and there was no fear of darkness. But would he find anything? What's that? He leaped to the controls, switching off the autopilot, and broke out of orbit, going back for a return look. Had there been just the faintest metallic glint below, as of a spaceship jutting up from the sand? Yes, there was a ship down there, and a cave of some sort. Alan felt strangely calm. With confident fingers he punched out a landing orbit and brought his ship down in the middle of the barren Venusian desert. End of chapter 17.